This narrative is about my silence, my comfort. The word comfort itself has a warm, welcoming, and safe connotation, but that is a part of the problem with comfort when reflecting on your own role in this society. It is safe. I want to use my narrative to see one aspect of my privilege, my socioeconomic privilege, more clearly and with a more constructively critical eye. My socioeconomic privilege consists of many aspects: my family structure, my education, my health care, even what I plan to do with my life later on. I was born in December 1995 in the city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Though Milwaukee is notoriously known for being one of the most segregated and, in certain areas, the most impoverished city in the nation, I live a comfortable life on the north side. I grew up in a multicultural and biracial household. My father identifies as black, and my mother identifies as white. My parents met when they were 19 years old, fell in love, and married when they were 34 years old, and have been happily living together for more than 20 years, purchasing their first home when my twin sister and I were 5 months old, so we could live in a comfortable and safe space. My mother has always been passionate about her career as a nurse and earns enough to allow us to be labeled middle class, while my father receives disability benefits from his former employer. This steady amount of income that my parents earn allows my sister and I to enjoy experiences such as attending summer camp for nearly a decade, attending swimming lessons for most of our lives, and even buying the clothes, shoes, music, movies, books, and other materials that we love. My family has always been a guiding force throughout my life and is always willing to support me in any situation, whether it is deciding how to care for my health in the best way possible, how to excel in school, or even how to surround myself with people who support my growth. At no point in my life thus far have I ever had any doubt that my family's resources could support not only what I dreamed of doing, but also what I plan on making a reality for myself. While looking back on my upbringing thus far, I've realized that I have always had time to relax, to hang out with friends, to go on a cruise or vacation even, to spend countless hours on social media. I had time to escape the pressures that were a part of my daily life, so-called pressures which I now realize were gifts as opposed to burdensome stressors. When I entered high school at Rufus King, a school considered one of the top 100 in the nation and the most academically challenging high school in our city's district, the amount of social capital and social support that I've always had throughout my life became especially apparent to me. Even while sometimes stressing out about college applications and admissions, I knew that my family, my friends, and even my teachers stood with me and would do their best to see me happy. This was my comfortable place, my comfortable state of being, my comfortable state of mind. And since most of my self-esteem comes from performing well in school, I had this illusion, that I could always step out of my socioeconomic privilege by reading a book, by watching a documentary, by reading a news article, by becoming more educated about the social injustices that plague the city of Milwaukee, that plague this world. And I'm not saying here that educating myself on these issues is a bad thing. It's not. In fact, it's my responsibility. But when I started taking seed, the focus on privilege, the concept, was flipped on its head, and I soon began to realize that I was consistently failing to recognize my own privilege. I was interested and fascinated and ready to talk about privilege as a social concept. What I was not ready to do in the beginning was talk openly about my own privilege and how I contribute to oppression. I tried to write about it, to think about it, to speak about it. My privilege could never stand on its own. The context of my privilege, my experience with my identities and my mind was always relative to another. This is where the discomfort manifested itself in my silence, in my closed fists, my sweaty palms, my darting eyes, my racing heart. After sharing such personal thoughts in such an intimate space with a group of peers who are so wonderfully sensitive and perceptive, I found it much easier for me to talk about identities where I am not as privileged, such as my race, or how I identify as a woman within the socially constructed gender binary. It is much more difficult to open my mouth to say something about something I do subconsciously, especially something like placing value on another human being based on skin color, clothing price, or how cultured they are. That's the thing. Before CETA, I'd always accepted being cultured as a compliment, without even thinking twice about how it acts as a classist statement, viewing someone through a certain lens to ensure my comfort. But as I go forth from my CETA experience, I know that I must always think about my comfort, my right to comfort as a privileged individual. I know that I must recognize my privilege and stare it right in the eyes without turning away in shame or in fear. While reflecting on my seed journey, I believe I have become better at defining myself for myself. I realize that privilege is a spectrum. There are very few areas of stark black and white. To take a marginalized identity of mine and to run with it, neglecting my intersectionality of other privileged aspects of myself, is to deny all of who I am and all of who I want to be. I may initially be ashamed to speak about my privileged experience, but I must recognize it as valid and worth reflecting upon. All this time I was used to relying on academia, to boost my self-esteem, to validate my experiences. It was familiar, it was comfortable, it was safe, right? But now the question I ask myself is, how do I navigate through my unearned advantages and continue to urge myself and others around me to be more sensitive to these advantages and use them productively, not to sit in some perpetual shadow of guilt, but rather to arrive at a heightened understanding of human responsibility? It all starts with feeling uncomfortable, and then opening up toward that discomfort, unafraid.